Sean Vanneman. I wrote the bulk of 100% of this game.
Hey, I'm Jake Rodkin. I did a lot of level design, UI design, and worked with everyone on the story for Firewatch.
The game has this weird structure that Chris and I talk about in another tape. This is the first thing I wrote, was this opening of the game that jumps between Henry's life and the trip out to the woods. And I used a little product called Twine to do that, which you can download and use. It's just a very simple choose-your-own-adventure tool. The simplest way to program a video game that one can then share with friends and play.
I think we were worried that the team would sort of perceive Henry as a blank slate, as sort of a generic game player protagonist, and we wanted to make sure, or we wanted to get in everyone's mindset, you're playing as a specific guy with a specific life.
Yeah, there's a reason when you play video games that a lot of your protagonists have amnesia, because it's really difficult when you're driving a character around who knows things about their life, or his or her life, that you, who you ostensibly are that person, don't know. So, yeah, we kept trying to write an opening of the game that happened sort of like weeks into Henry's experience, and then quickly realized that it was like, well, why would he not be able to say X? Well, because his relationship with his wife is Y. So, but the player doesn't know that. Yeah. And this was the quickest way to get everybody on board, was to just take the thing that I wrote that answered the question, I think, for Jane and you at the beginning, which was like, who is Henry? And I would write these character profiles that were really bad. And then I went, what if I just let you play a thing, and then you can figure out who he is? And we held on to that until we had the idea to put into the game.
It means that when you're playing Firewatch and Henry and Delilah start talking about Henry's wife, you don't have to learn it through his dialogue, because you made the choices that brought him where he is today.
It's actually really cool.
Hi, it's Jake again.
Hey, I'm Chris Remo.
Oh, hey, Chris.
Hi there. I was a game designer and the music composer on Firewatch.
Nice.
So you're hearing now the first piece of interactive music that went into Firewatch. The first piece of music that actually
responds to what you're doing in the game?
Exactly, yeah. So this is a piece of music that's divided into technically 6 parts. And what's happening is, as you're playing through this introductory sequence, when you hit certain points in the narrative, it sends a signal to Wise, which is the name of the audio middleware we're using, and then when Wise gets that signal, it waits until the next sort of musically appropriate transition point, and then when it hits that, it smoothly transitions into the next section of music, and so it creates the effect that you're just listening to one big long piece of music that just happens to be timed very nicely to your playthrough.
It just happens to get sadder and sadder at the exact rate that your life gets sadder and sadder.
Yeah, exactly. This was a challenging process, both because I had no idea what the music should sound like, and also because it was the first interactive piece of music in the game, so the technical sort of just how does this work was also a part of it. But as it turned out, this music was changed. I mean, Jake, you may remember this. This music changed relatively little over the course of development in comparison to a lot of.
I think it started off as maybe 3 pieces and it expanded out to 5 over development. But other than that, it's one of the first things dropped in, shipped. Get ready to hear about that a lot on this commentary.
ain't taking my wife. Kiss my ass. You ain't taking my wife. Tell you that.
I'm Nels Anderson, and I was a designer and gameplay programmer on... I'm Nels Anderson, and I was a designer and gameplay programmer on Firewatch.
I am Jane Ng, and I worked on the 3D environment art in Firewatch.
So, you're likely standing at the base of... You're home away from home. You're home in the wilderness. For all intents and purposes, more or less, this is basically just a real straight-up tower like they existed out in the woods, right?
Yeah, I think it is Portland. There's somebody in Portland who was very good about archiving a lot of blueprints about various type of fire lookouts of the state, and we got some, and that's how we started off building the lookout tower, just by looking through how they were actually built.
It's slightly taller than a real one, right?
We had to make quite a bit of adjustments because, for example, the stairway you see here, normally fire lookout stairways are not on the outside, but for more interesting gameplay and views for the player, we opted to change that. But ultimately we still wanted the tower to feel like a real tower. So we had to figure stuff like, hey, how does the plumbing actually work? How do they get water? Stuff like that. It actually is very important for a real tower.
And if you go look around the base of the tower, you will actually see a big old plastic cistern.
We are not a survival game of any sort, but it is important to make sure that all that stuff is actually thought out, so the space feels realistic.
Right. You don't want someone playing the game being like, wait a minute, there's no how does this guy drink? How is he not dead?
When I normally play video games, I'm always interested in stuff like, hey, where's the bathroom? Here we have the outhouse and you can go anywhere, but stuff like water is very important. So in a real fire lookout situation, what they do is they will use a cistern, and they will capture rainwater from the roof, and you will actually see that we actually have a little pipe down from the roof, and we even have what they call a first flush filter being there, which is actually what they use.
That's my favorite kind of filter, really.
Yeah, I had to look up what do they do, because once you go, okay, you collect rainwater from the roof, it won't be all nasty, and then hey, somebody already figured that out on how to collect rainwater. What do you know?
We actually visited a number of different lookout towers as we were researching the game, and it was always very satisfying to see elements of things we saw in the real world and make their way back into the game, and vice versa.
So we also made sure to have a tab here, like a little faucet, where you can actually get water from the cistern.
Yeah, if you click on it, it will play an animation of a hand gripping a knob and water comes out for 2 seconds. Doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
But it's there.
I think for a while we actually were thinking should we just let the player turn on the water? Or then what happens if the water just runs out? And then James had a very good idea of just going just make one animation that you turn on the faucet and turn it off immediately, just so that you know, hey, there's water in here and you won't die. That's Henry.
Hey, it's Chris again.
Oh, it's Jake.
So if you're listening to this right now, it's because you went off the beaten path really early in the game. Obviously, you probably did that because the commentary map told you to. But
you don't need a map to tell you
I
to go here.
didn't have
You
no
could just go here.
commentary
we
map.
had to.
I just
One
went
of the
here.
biggest challenges in this game was throughout the entire narrative, keeping in mind that really players can pretty much go anywhere that they've unlocked on the map at any time, and sometimes that's actually really inconvenient for the narrative of the game. We had to come up with a lot of excuses for why you couldn't go to certain places at certain times, or if we couldn't think of an excuse.
Some call it an excuse, others call it a thrilling narrative event.
Right, so for instance, where you are right now, if you keep walking in that direction, you will sort of cross the river, but then be unable to go any further.
There's like a lot of dense underbrush.
And then about halfway through the game, when a big fire happens, that area is burned out, and you can walk past it into Cottonwood Creek and
Pork Pond, etc.
and all those areas. Yeah, it was really, really hard to think of justifications like that weren't completely implausible.
Yep.
And so we actually have relatively few cases of that in the game.
Yeah, if we couldn't come up with a good way to keep a player out of a space, we instead flipped the other direction and went, well, what can we do to support it and make it interesting? On this day, before the story started, not a whole lot, but we thought it was fun to point out that you can wander a lot more of the map than you might even think at the very, very, very start of the game.
Yep, and then especially once you get ropes, that increases a lot more. So just as you get these items that allow you to explore more of the world, we had to face these increasingly complicated and frustrating design challenges of how does the whole game not break all the time now. It was interesting and difficult, but also cool.
Yep, bye.
Hey, it's Chris again.
Oh, it's Jake.
So if you're listening to this right now, it's because you went off the beaten path really early in the game. Obviously, you probably did that because the commentary map told you to. But
you don't need a map to tell you to go here. You could
I
just go
didn't.
here.
We had to. One of the biggest challenges in this game
I did not have no
was
commentary
throughout
map.
the entire narrative, keeping in mind that really players can pretty much go anywhere that they've unlocked on the map at any time, and sometimes that's actually really inconvenient for the narrative of the game. We had to come up with a lot of excuses for why you couldn't go to certain places at certain times, or if we couldn't think of an excuse.
Some call it an excuse, others call it a thrilling narrative event.
Right, so for instance, where you are right now, if you keep walking in that direction, you will sort of cross the river, but then be unable to go any further.
There's like a lot of dense underbrush.
And then about halfway through the game, when a big fire happens, that area is burned out, and you can walk past it into Cottonwood Creek and
Pork Pond, etc.
and all those areas. Yeah, it was really, really hard to think of justifications like that weren't completely implausible.
Yep.
And so we actually have relatively few cases of that in the game.
Yeah, if we couldn't come up with a good way to keep a player out of a space, we instead flipped the other direction and went, well, what can we do to support it and make it interesting? On this day, before the story started, not a whole lot, but we thought it was fun to point out that you can wander a lot more of the map than you might even think at the very, very, very start of the game.
Yep, and then especially once you get ropes, that increases a lot more. So just as you get these items that allow you to explore more of the world, we had to face these increasingly complicated and frustrating design challenges of how does the whole game not break all the time now. It was interesting and difficult, but also cool.
Yep, bye.
Two Forks Tower.
Hello? Whoever this is?
It's Henry, right?
Yeah.
I'm Delilah.
Yeah, that's what the guy said on the phone.
So, what's wrong with you?
Excuse me?
People take this job to get away from something. So, what's wrong?
What's wrong with you?
That's a great idea. Go ahead.
Look, I just hiked for 2 days, so I don't really follow whatever it is you're doing right now.
You take a stab at what's wrong with me.
Fine, then can I sleep forever?
Sure, buddy. Okay, now go ahead.
Okay, you're probably out here because nobody back home can stand you. Which, after this brief introduction, is not a big shock.
Ouch. I'll chalk that up to you being tired and grumpy.
Well, I'd better get some sleep then.
One sec. Now it's my turn.
Okay, good night, bye.
Let's see. I don't know anything about you, but 9 times out of 10, folks out here simply got dumped.
Huh, is that it?
Close?
Good night.
Good night. Welcome to the job. Morning, Henry. Well, I guess good afternoon. You probably slept like a rock. Anyway, there's still a few hours of daylight to get some work in. I can see you at your desk, so call me when you're ready.
Hey, sorry, guess I slept in.
You got a relaxing, what, 14 hours of sleep? Whew.
Yeah, Jesus, I guess it's what, 6?
6:45.
Whoops.
Don't worry about it. That hike puts everyone out of commission for a day or two. But now that you're up, let me quickly get you acquainted with the job. There's a thing in the middle of your room with a round map on it. Do you see it?
Okay, yeah, I see it.
This is the Osborne Firefinder, invented in 1914 by W.B.
Osborne?
You use this to spot, you guessed it, What the fuck?
What is it?
Nothing. You use this to... Oh, fuck me!
Good God, language, lady.
Out your west-facing window. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Are those fucking fireworks?
Whoa, that's not legal, right?
No. You need to get down there right now and stop them. Fire danger is through the fucking roof.
Is that really my job?
Your job is whatever I say it is. Look, the closest ranger is like 2 days away. Go down there and set him straight.
Nels, it feels like you on the team did the most sort of digging about what the real job is like, what is in the actual space, and then checked us against reality when we kind of went off the reservation.
I mean, in general, I really like doing research. That's sort of a thing I've enjoyed on all the projects I've worked on. So for this, a bunch of folks on the team read this great book called Fire Season by Philip Connors, which is kind of like a